When it comes to improving gut health, it's super important to consider the levels of short-chain fatty acids like butyrate. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 5 ways to increase butyrate levels and other short-chain fatty acid levels. And ultimately, by improving these levels, this can have amazing benefits in your health, right? If you suffer with poor gut health, these can be especially important. Now, if you're new to my YouTube channel, first of all, I just want to welcome you to this channel. I'm glad you found this channel here. There's lots of great information, I think, that you'll find throughout these videos. I'm Dr. Hagmeyer. I'm the clinic director here at drhagmeyer.com, where we specialize in helping patients with chronic health problems using functional medicine and clinical nutrition. So let's jump into the different ways to increase these levels of butyrate as well as some of these other short-chain fatty acid levels. So the first tip I have for you is start supplementing with butyrate, right? This is the most direct method and probably the fastest method of increasing the levels of short-chain fatty acids. And for those people that are struggling with a lot of GI issues, this direct method, this direct supplementation method is probably the fastest way of getting better and feeling better. But the one thing I really want to stress here is that this alone will not fix the reason why butyrate levels and these other short-chain fatty acid levels are low in the first place, right? So while I've seen great results with direct supplementation, these are most effective, I should say, when used in conjunction with diet, all right? So you can't just supplement with short-chain fatty acids without making some changes to the gut microbiome through diet measures, right? And again, I'll get into this a little bit later in the video. Now that brings us to tip number 2, right? And that is the importance of improving the gut environment or the gut microbiome as well as the bacterial diversity of the gut. Essentially what we want to do here is we want to really make those good bacteria live there. We want to make them happy in their home, so to speak, right? Now our microbiome really has all kinds of bacteria. There's good bacteria, there's bad bacteria, and then there's opportunistic bacteria. So to really make the good bacteria want to live there and really just kind of crowd out the bad or opportunistic bacteria, what you really want to do is you want to make sure that you're feeding the different kinds of bacteria their favorite foods. Now, if you have gut dysbiosis or even a fungal overgrowth or parasites, you're going to have problems with short-chain fatty acid production, right? In addition to directly supplementing with these things like butyrate, you'll also want to take probiotics because, again, this creates that favorable environment. Certain strains of probiotics have been shown to specifically increase butyrate levels. And from the research that I've seen and I've read, the strains that are the most beneficial are going to be the lactobacillus species and your soil-based probiotics. So from a lactobacillus standpoint, these are going to be lactobacillus acidophilus. These are going to be things like lactobacillus plantarum. These are going to be lactobacillus rhamnosus. And from the soil-based probiotics, these are going to be things like Bacillus coagulans, Bacillus subtilis, and Bacillus clausii. Now, you might be wondering about fermented foods, right? Because we all hear about how beneficial fermented foods are. And so while certainly you could drink and you could eat fermented foods, you can make these even at home, and these do contain probiotics, the one problem with this is that if you're already somebody who's struggling with gut issues, there's no way of quantifying really how much of the kinds of probiotics that you're getting and really what kind of probiotics are found in those fermented foods, right? And so again, what I find is that many people who have SIBO or Crohn's or ulcerative colitis, they just can't handle the high levels of histamines that you often find in fermented foods. And especially this is relevant in the beginning levels of treatment. So for those people, supplements are really the best place to start. Right? Now, the other thing that you need to consider when it comes to creating an environment that just encourages good bacterial diversity, of course, is your diet, right? Are you eating foods that are high in fiber, high in resistant starches, high in polyphenols, things like berries and green tea and colorful vegetables? Or is your diet loaded with not so gut-friendly foods, right? Things like sugar and caffeine, alcohol, lots of preservatives and food additives and nitrates and benzoic acid, and all those things, soda, sweet and low, flour, aspartame. I mean, I think you kind of get the idea there. But another thing that just wreaks havoc on the diversity of the microbiome is medications, right? You'll also find that the biggest offenders of the gut microbiome are things like smoking. And then from a medication standpoint, things like antibiotics and antidepressants and birth control pills. Right? The other medications that we see that are just very, very damaging to the gut are, of course, those medications that are often prescribed for people with acid reflux. So these are going to be your proton pump inhibitors. This will also include drugs that are prescribed to people with constipation. So laxatives are very detrimental to the health of the microbiome. And then again, another big drug that we often see that people with blood sugar problems have is metformin, right? We know that so many people that are diabetics have gut issues, and the very drugs that they're taking are contributing to the gut issues, right? So again, these medications, they just wipe out the bacterial diversity, and then when you wipe out the bacterial diversity, you cause gut dysbiosis, right? And so if you reduce the levels of butyrate and other short-chain fatty acid production, remember, it's these bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids. So if you wipe them all out, there's no way of producing them unless you directly supplement with them. So again, antibiotics are so powerful that they've been shown to just wipe out the microbiome for periods of up to 2 years, depending on the kind of antibiotic. And this has been shown for even people that have gone on antibiotics for 3 and 4 days. So again, it's always better to address the root cause of these problems than to take medications and just manage a disease, right? So again, if you've been on any of those medications that I mentioned, or you've been diagnosed with SIBO or IBD, then I recommend getting a functional stool test. If you're someone who has tried taking, like say for an example, a probiotic, and you felt worse, you had more bloating, more gas, more brain fog, more acid reflux, more diarrhea, more constipation, this is another reason to get a functional stool test, all right? So again, if you're thinking about going on a low FODMAP diet or an elemental diet or a ketogenic diet or an autoimmune paleo diet, again, get a functional stool test. And again, the reason being is that all of these diets, while very helpful in the early stages of treatment, the problem with them is that they can take a situation of the gut where the gut is already compromised, and they can take a bad gut and make a bad gut even worse, right? So again, a functional stool test provides so many different answers that standard stool testing just doesn't provide, right? For starters, these tests can provide information as it relates to the kinds of strains of bacteria that are in your gut. So again, the kinds of bacteria that you're low in or even high in, this can best be used, or this information can be used to determine the best kinds of probiotics for you and for your particular microbiome, challenges of the microbiome. Now, the other thing I like about a functional stool test is that of course, it can show the levels of short-chain fatty acids, right? A functional stool test can show if you have inflammation, even if a colonoscopy was done that may have missed it. And so again, to a doctor who knows how to read these tests and interpret these tests can have a tremendous impact simply by providing information on how to improve the terrain of the gut. And that is a huge issue, right? Many times I find that people that have all kinds of gut issues, inflammatory gut issues, irritable bowel syndrome, we have to address the terrain. Okay, so if that's something that you're interested in and you want to know more about that, I'll leave a link in the description. The other thing is, remember this. Good health really requires just a symbiotic relationship between the gut bacteria and the populations of bacteria in the gut, your diet, and your lifestyle habits. So very important that you dial those 3 things in. Number 3, again, from a dietary standpoint, you just want to increase both soluble and insoluble fibers. So you want to start increasing the resistant starches, increasing the types of carbohydrates that you're able to tolerate. Again, soluble fiber is the type of fiber that's easily broken down. It's digested by gut bacteria. And unfortunately, the one drawback for this for some people is that it can slow down motility, right? It can slow down digestion. And for those people that really have a bad case of constipation, sometimes that can make the constipation a little bit worse. So again, depending on whether or not you're having one motility disorder or another, you'll have to weigh the benefits versus the risks. Now, on the other hand, insoluble fiber is a fiber that basically goes through the digestive system and it remains unchanged, right? And so as it moves through the gastrointestinal tract, it doesn't change very much, right? And it helps bulk up the contents of the bowel movement. Now, again, insoluble fiber can increase bowel movements. And very often, the only word of caution that I have here about fiber and resistant starches is when it comes to people that have an underlying bacterial overgrowth, right? They have SIBO. So again, if you suspect bacterial overgrowth or if you suspect fungal overgrowth, you can assess your risk of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or even a fungus by visiting my website. There's a section at the very top in the right-hand corner where it says quizzes. And you can take that, that quiz, and you can assess your risk for SIBO as well as fungal overgrowth, right? So that brings us to tip number 4. If you don't have SIBO or histamine intolerance and MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome, studies show that fermented foods a few times a week can actually increase the levels of your short-chain fatty acid levels, all right? So again, if you don't know what histamine intolerance is, or maybe you've just recently heard about it, histamine intolerance is really the overproduction of histamine in the body, or the inability to degrade or break down histamine. And so that histamine begins to accumulate in the body. Now, for people that suffer with histamine intolerance, some of the symptoms include things like runny nose, watery eyes, scratchy throat. Maybe they have wheezing, maybe they have asthma. Very often, these patients suffer with hives, they suffer with eczema, they suffer with asthma. And again, these are not the kinds of symptoms that you experience, once a year, right? These are typically symptoms that are experienced throughout the year. Sometimes, depending on the severity of the histamine intolerance, patients can suffer with these symptoms and a variety of symptoms all year long. So again, these symptoms are not something that is just, a seasonal allergy, comes and goes, but again, more of a more serious problem. So again, the other thing one thing I forgot to mention about histamine intolerance and MCAS is that a lot of times another symptom here are things like depression and headaches and migraines. Headaches, and of course, that anxiety that I mentioned. Now, my last tip, tip number 5, really is about fish oil and the importance of essential fatty acids. And the reason why, fatty acids are so important, essential fatty acids, is because studies show that these essential fatty acids increase short-chain fatty acid production. So they improve the brain-gut axis, which again, I've talked about in so many different articles and videos on my website and other YouTube channel videos that I've done. They reduce inflammation. They're good for your heart. They're good for your brain. They reduce inflammation in the gut, like I just mentioned. They help heal the gut in the sense that they prevent intestinal permeability issues or that leaky gut. And then lastly, they also help take the probiotics that we take in, and they help those probiotics stick to the cells. And so again, by taking this approach of supplementation as well as dietary changes, there's really no reason why you shouldn't be able to get those short-chain fatty acid levels up and improve your gut microbiome. Now, depending on your individual health challenges, some of the strategies you can jump right into, and others, these might be strategies to implement at later stages of your healing journey. But one thing I will say is that either way, all of these tips will, in the long run, help your gut be healthier. And of course, a healthier gut is going to be a healthier you. So help your gut make more butyrate by doing all those things that we've talked about today. All right, so that's going to wrap up today's video. Don't forget to check out the description box where, again, I'll leave some of the links that I've talked about in today's video. And also, do me a favor. If you like today's video, hit that like button, right? If you have a question or you have a comment, make sure to leave that below. I'll do my best to answer those questions because, again, we love helping people. We love helping them find solutions. So I'm Dr. Hagmeyer, and we'll see you next time at the next video. Take care.